For nearly 2 centuries, the Knights Templar were among the most powerful men in Europe. They were warriors, bankers, monks, and symbols of crusading Christianity. Then, in a single morning, it all collapsed. On Friday, October 13th, 1307, soldiers across France moved in silence. At dawn, they struck. Templar knights were dragged from their beds, arrested without warning, and accused of unimaginable crimes. The order that once protected kings and financed kingdoms was suddenly declared heretical. This is the story of how the Knights Templar rose to incredible power, and how fear, debt, and ambition brought them down. Not through war on the battlefield, but through betrayal in the halls of power. Origins of the Knights Templar, 1119. The story begins in the aftermath of the First Crusade. In 1119, a small group of knights led by Hugues de Payens pledged themselves to a simple mission: to protect Christian pilgrims traveling to Jerusalem. They took vows of poverty, chastity, and obedience. They lived as monks, but fought as elite soldiers. At first they were few, but their reputation for discipline and courage spread quickly. With the support of the Church, especially Bernard of Clairvaux, the Knights Templar were officially recognized and granted extraordinary privileges. They answered only to the Pope: no king, no lord, no nation. The rise of an unstoppable power. As the Crusades expanded, so did the Templars' influence. They built fortresses across the Holy Land. They became the most feared heavy cavalry on the battlefield. But their true power came off the battlefield. The Knights Templar pioneered an early form of international banking. Pilgrims could deposit money in Europe and withdraw it safely in the Holy Land. Soon, kings were borrowing from them. Nobles entrusted them with land and treasure. The Church relied on them to move wealth across borders. The Templars became rich, and more dangerously, they became independent. They were loyal to God, not to crowns. The turning point: a king in debt. By the early 14th century, the Crusades were failing. Jerusalem was lost. The Holy Land slipped from Christian control, and the Templars' original mission faded. At the same time, one man grew increasingly uneasy: Philip IV of France. Philip was deeply in debt to the Templars. He ruled a kingdom struggling for money and control. An order that powerful, wealthy, and independent was no longer an asset. It was a threat. So Philip made a decision that would change history. Friday the 13th, the arrests, 1307. On October 13th, 1307, King Philip struck without warning. Across France, Templar commanders were arrested simultaneously. Their properties were seized. Their leaders imprisoned. They were accused of heresy, blasphemy, idol worship, and secret rituals. The charges were shocking and largely false. Under torture, some Templars confessed, only to later recant. But the damage was done. Public opinion turned. Fear replaced admiration. The legend of Friday the 13th was born. Trials, torture, and confessions. The trials that followed were brutal. Confessions were extracted through pain. Testimony contradicted itself. Justice bent to political will. Even the Pope was pressured. Pope Clement V, caught between faith and royal power, hesitated, then yielded. The Church did not formally declare the Templars guilty of heresy, but it dissolved the order anyway. In 1312, the Knights Templar officially ceased to exist. The final fall. The last Grand Master of the Templars, Jacques de Molay, was burned at the stake in 1314. According to legend, he cursed both the king and the pope as the flames rose. Within a year, both were dead. History or myth, no one knows for sure, but the image endured. Legacy, myths, and obsession. The sudden destruction of the Templars left questions unanswered. Where did their wealth go? Did they hide secrets? Did any survive? Over centuries, myths grew. Lost treasures, sacred relics, secret knowledge, links to Freemasons and shadowy orders. Popular culture turned the Templars into legends, but the real story is more unsettling. Conclusion: power, fear, and betrayal. The fall of the Knights Templar was not caused by battlefield defeat. It was caused by politics, by fear of power beyond control, by debt disguised as justice, by ambition cloaked in faith. Their story reminds us that even the most powerful institutions can fall, not when they lose strength, but when they lose protection. And it asks a final question. Were the Knights Templar destroyed because they were guilty, or because they were inconvenient?